I was so tired today. I didn't think I was going to make it tonight. And now I see all these,
Keep talking.
I see all these beautiful faces and lovely people. And I'm really feel kind of shy now in speaking about power of goodness. It's something that's been part of my life actually for about 25, 30 years. So in other words, it's my life's work. And it's hard to put it into words, but it's something that feeds my soul. I feel it's something that is what God asked me to do. And you can take, God will give a leading and say, oh, come over here. I have so much to do. And could you do this one little part? This one little drop in the bucket. And I don't know, I had even some what I would call mystical experiences around this. And so, oh, well, that's no good. The title of the first view of the project was called Lighting Candles in the Dark, and I think we better get some. Yes, so this project did come to me as a leading. I had asked, I was living in a community that was, was a new age community and everything. And I had a lovely grandson at the time that used to come. He was about 1.5 years old, and that was great. But there was a part of me that wasn't happy. And I said, why in the world aren't I happy? It's so, it's idyllic here. And I did offer a prayer saying, God, what would you like me to do with my life? And I got it. I went over and I had this big bay window in my room. I was living in an attic room. And I looked out at the Blue Ridge Mountains across this beautiful lawn with 7 oak trees. And I experienced the connection between outer peace and inner peace. It was like one and the same. I can't explain it. And I knew I was going to work for world peace. Now, that's not very unusual thing for a Quaker, to say, but it was real. And I found my way, my friend Jay Worrell, I was living near Charlottesville, Virginia, and he had a visitor there, a speaker from the Soviet embassy. And this man was up on this huge stage with about 700 folks in the audience. He was all alone. And the audience, when he asked for questions, they were just giving this guy a hard time. And I can still see him up there, and he raises his hand like that. The audience quieted down, and he said, the problem here is that you think your way is right, but I don't. But we can live here together. And it just melted everyone. It was so real. And he started to share his personal pain over the disarmament talks failing. And his specialty was disarmament. And so at that moment, I knew I was going to work in Russia. And I got there. So the project, as it ended up, we started a story collection based on the theme of nonviolence and reconciliation. And I'll read what it says. The Power of Goodness story collection grew out of a wish to help young people learn the ways of peace. The stories are based on the universal values of love, compassion, kindness, and forgiveness. And we put the word universal in there because no matter what country you are from, what part of the planet you are from, everyone understands love, compassion, kindness, and forgiveness. It doesn't matter. So I made many trips to Russia, and I had an oversight committee at Central Philadelphia monthly meeting. And they said, you know, you're just taking these little trips to Russia. You need to go and spend a longer period of time. So I went for 6 months, and I found myself in a school in Novgorod, which means new city, but it's the oldest city in Russia. You know, because it was the first one where Russian Orthodoxy went. And I found myself in a classroom with a small number of students, and there they are. And I used a Friends General Conference book called Lighting Candles in the Dark. And these were stories of nonviolence and reconciliation. And the children, I thought, you know, it was after school, and I'd see them playing on the playground with basketballs and stuff. These were kids like 9, 10, 11, 12. But at the appointed time, I could hear them running down the hallway to come in to talk about these stories. And towards the end, at like the next and the last class there, I asked them, do you think this would be a good idea to make these stories available for other Russian kids in schools? And this is what they said. We fell into silence. It was like, if you've ever been to a gathered Quaker meeting, there's something that you know is real. There's really a spirit there. And I felt, we fell into this. I'd never talked about a Quaker meeting ever, to them. And I felt this one little girl next to me kind of stir around. And I said, Marie, would you like to speak? And she says, there are moments in these stories where we can do the same. And she's Russian speaking, and she's a little girl. And then we fell into silence. And then I saw a little boy on the other side, and I pointed to him, and he said, they show us another way. And we fell into silence. This was not a popcorn meeting, believe me. They show us that love is important, someone else said. They teach us about kindness. They tell us about people in other parts of the world. And I knew a deep sense of knowing that someone, the Holy Spirit was speaking through them and encouraging me to do this. I knew this gentleman there on the right. His name was Misha Roshan. And Misha and I really got along well. We had worked together on this, on doing Quaker books for Russian speakers. Okay. And Misha, so I told Misha about this because he knew the publishing world. He was situated well in Moscow. He knew his way around. He was a savvy guy. he seemed like a dumpy old professor, but he was really sharp. He was really a sharp man. He was very spiritually oriented, and he really cared about people. I can remember one time we were in a subway stop and there was a homeless child there. And he looked at this little boy, and I could just tell his eyes were water. I says, Misha, have you always felt this way? And he said, yes, but I never did anything about it. And so he jumped aboard on the project, and we brought the first joint book, a Russian English bilingual book. At the time, it was still called Lighting Candles in the Dark. And we donated it to Russian Russian teachers, and we even got it into an orphanage. And I got to go and talk with these kids about it. It was so exciting. It works. Yeah. And then Chris Hunter on the left there came into the project. I can't remember how I met Chris, but Chris was working for British Peace and Service, and he thought he was very concerned about the war in Chechnya at the time. And he said, I think I'll go for a year and see what I can do. Of course, that was 30 some years ago, and he still is working with Chechens. And yes, a dear friend, a dear man. And at one time he brought a small group of Chechens out into the West because he wanted them to tell the world what was happening there, with the war going on. And I had never really been close to people who had lived in an invasion, daily, outside their homes. And it was moving, and they spoke, with translation. And it was so moving. It was so moving. You can see the woman, the one I can't point to her, she's crying there. And then afterwards, I went up to Misha and said, Misha, we have to do this book in Chechnya. And he says, well, there's a war going on. And I said, I know, that's why we have to do it. That's why we have to do it. And so, and Misha was the right person to do that, because his specialty, he was an academic, whereas it was Christian-Muslim conflicts. And so he knew his way around, and he knew Chechen literary writers, the top ones. And he just, he was in there. And so we got together, and lo and behold, we completed a Chechen version of the book in 3 languages. And I said to him, I said, Misha, we have to get some artwork from the children in Chechnya. And he says, well, that's when he said again, well, there's a war there. And I don't think I said anything. And it was less than a week. He had uncovered, through all of his contacts, a small art class in the basement of a bombed out building in Grozny, the capital of Chechnya. And so God was guiding this, because you become very humble at times like this, because I didn't do anything, And that's where the Quaker term "get out of the way" is the way to get things done, when it's something like this. So, and then Misha said, I don't know how I'm going to get the books into Chechnya because, the borders are closed. There's Russian guards all over the place, and they won't allow us in, with all these books. And here's what he did. He finds a solution: trucking books on back roads from Russia to Chechnya. And that's what he did, where there weren't any guards. And he hired some friends. I don't know where he found these guys, but here are these Russians in the picture on the left. And here they are. You can see the man, the older man there, handing books out to teachers in Chechnya. It's like, how did that happen? And here's and here's where I said, we have to get illustrations for the stories from Chechnya. And we did add some Chechen stories in the book, and also some Russian stories in the book. And let's see. Oh, this slide wasn't finished here. I'm going to skip ahead with that. And here are a group of Chechen kids, and their teacher there is Venera. And Venera was one of the first ones 25 years ago that really got enthusiastic about the project. And she still is working there. And the teacher in the middle with the, yeah. And here's another teacher in Chechnya. And look at the one little girl there who's just looking at her so intent. She looks to be about 8 years old. And then Rustam also was one of the first ones to actually use power of goodness stories. And he did this up until the last to the invasion in Ukraine. And Chechnya is still under Russian domination. I mean, there's no war there now. And he's the one who all this time has like been the manager of the project there. And we got a donation from the U.S. Institute of Peace. Chris Hunter was banned from going into Russia. They said he was a threat to the country. Well, they say that about Quakers all the time. The FBI is always after us, those kinds of things, he was so devoted, just so devoted. And since the Ukrainian invasion, they've taken very close watch on Chechens, and they're wanting to induct them into the army. I mean, here they were, Russia invaded them, and they're asking these guys to go fight against somebody else that's getting invaded. But it wasn't safe for him to continue the project. And actually, the woman who was that's in the middle there is taking over the project now, Venera. Yeah, it's so real. And there Rustam is in the back waving his hand. And Chris wanted to really get this all over Chechnya, and he took the money that he raised that for the project. We got 100. It was $100 $20,000 or something like that, 100, I forget. And it was to make it possible for these psychologists to go out into the country, into the mountain regions, backwoods and everything, and work in schools with teachers on how to use these stories as a peace education tool. And so it got, it really got in there. I've never been, and when this project started, I never had heard of Chechnya. I'm not a real worldly person, but here I've met about all of these people because we all met once in Turkey. I was living with my daughter for 6 months in Manhattan. She came home one day and I said, I'm going to Turkey. On the Turkish Mediterranean. I mean, it was great. Oh, and they were so loving, so loving. Okay, Ollie Moles, the handsome one. Yes, he's disappeared. Okay, he ran a survey, and he's a specialist. He's a social psychologist, and he did a lot of studies. And I want to read you the comments about the most important things that they learned, that the students learned, that the teachers noticed, that the kids were saying it over and over. The need to be kinder, fairer, and more merciful. Everybody has the ability to be good. The parents said, oh, and they gave each child a book so that they could take it home and read it in the families. And one family got a hold of them and said, do you have any more of those stories? Our family's having a hard time. And those stories really helped. And we'd like to have some other ones. And that's when I say, gosh, all of this, it's been worth it. That's to hear something like that. Okay, the parents said, they almost all said the stories changed the way they acted toward one another. That's within the family. They saw these kinds of changes, treating each other with more patience and kindness, more sharing, trust, and more understanding, and calmer problem solving. And then the teacher said, the stories teach about kindness, justice, peace, forgiveness, and non-violence. Children learned about people working together from different backgrounds. Because a lot of the stories in the book are people that, weren't getting along. And then the psychologist says the children became kinder, more respectful, and patient toward each other. They use more constructive problem solving to overcome conflicts. It was real. It was real. Okay, and I have here, Power of Goodness goes to Ukraine before the current invasion in Ukraine. And this was such an advantage there because it was already in schools, and we couldn't begin it now, but it's already there, just kind of, underground, like almost. And here's a classroom, and obviously they had the teacher had the kids draw one of the stories, some illustrations. I don't recognize the story, but yeah. But you can see in the drawing, it's about friendship, reaching out. Oh, now Chechens and Ukrainians didn't get along especially well together. They weren't at war with each other, but they, they weren't the best of friends. But with the help of Chris Hunter and Nadine Hoover, what was brought into the project at a little later time. But actually she was involved in it when this picture was done. They got the Chechens to come in and help train the Ukrainian teachers and facilitators. Yeah. You know, how did that? Yeah, it goes on, and it's all true. It really happened. And that, you know, and they still are friendly together. You know, it's so that's what helped to get the power of goodness entrenched in Ukraine. And I thought of the expression, it takes a village, because no one person does any of this. No one person does any of this. And that actually helps, because it rattles the ego, and you can become humble and say, you know, that the Spirit is working through me when I get out of the way. And I didn't always. And that was the great thing about having an oversight committee, because they would sometimes say, you know, Janet, you're outrunning your guide on this one. And then they would say, you know, at other times, I think you're holding back. You weren't listening, you know. I mean, it's good. It's great. This woman here, Olha, some of you might have been over at the meeting house when Chris Hunter and Olha spoke. How many went over? Yes, it was a couple months ago. Well, the Indonesians were over there, and Olha and Chris spoke over at the meeting house. But she lives in Lviv and works with people displaced from their homes because of the war, and helping them to cope with losses and finding a way. And she uses power of goodness in her work with them. Friends Peace Teams eventually has taken on this project, and they use Alternatives to Violence Project work, or AVP, and you know, combination of that and the stories together. You know, they blend in with each other, and one enriches the other. And when she was here, or actually it was on a Zoom call that I was on with her and others, they asked her what we could do to help. And she said, hire someone else to work with me and do what I'm doing, because the need is so great and it's hard work, and I need a colleague. I need someone to work with me. You know, and you know, it was so much, you know, she wasn't asking for a pay raise or benefits or anything, you know, she wanted, she has these people coming through, you know, who are desperate. And you know, she actually looks like a fashion model in all the pictures of her, you know. But she's a lovely person and so sincere. So sincere. Okay. And this is Nadine Hoover. I don't know, I'm thinking right now of Rustam, you know, who's, you know, they're always coming at him and checking on him. And of the people that Olha is working with as they come through, and about her, they're pretty much, you know, she's not totally on her own, but she's doing all of this work. And I don't know, I feel like stopping right now and just holding these these beautiful souls in the light. May they hear our prayers. May they receive our prayers. There came a time when I was at yearly meeting, and there was an African man there, and he saw the little display that I had put up about the project. Oh, we could do this in Africa and everything. And I mean, my vision was that this can go any place in the world, because we're based on the universal themes, you know, and so it can go any place. And I was just, all excited about this, and and everything. And I was walking in my house, and I heard this voice over my shoulder saying, "Janet, you cannot take on another country." You know, I mean, it takes a lot. It just takes a lot. You know, I'm kind of giving you the highlights of it, but there's, you know, a lot of times when nothing's happening except what's going on up here. And, you know, and so the patient waiting was something, but I took that to heart, that I really, you know, that this was what I was meant to do. And I mean, I wasn't going to abandon it. And so for a year and a half, I was joining Quaker committees, thinking, oh, well, this the Peace Committee of yearly meeting will take this on. And they all loved the idea, but nobody really, you know, they didn't want to take it on. And raise your hands if in this moment you want to take all of this on. Yeah. You know, it just, you know, I mean, you know, I can tell from your faces that you're inspired. But yeah, and so I did that, and then I came to realize that that I was outrunning my guide again. I was definitely outrunning my guide, and this was a year and a half. I was in this morass, like with this, and then and I had a friend. I was living in San Luis Obispo in California at the time, and I had a very close friend at meeting. It was Gay Howard, and Gay told me over a long period of time, on many occasions, Janet, I think Nadine Hoover would be very interested in this project. And she had been telling Nadine, Nadine, I think you would be interested in this project that Janet has going. And neither of us did anything about it. And there was one night when I was sitting up on D15 in the main house, that it was about 10 or so years ago. I thought, I think I'll give that woman a call. You know, I mean, it was after I realized I was really outrunning my guide, and I think I'll give her a call. And I usually can't find anybody's phone number or any pieces of paper. My son Rex here was wanting me to find something a couple hours ago, and I couldn't. But I grabbed her phone number immediately, and how I got it, I don't know. And I called, I dialed her number, and Nadine is someone who is so busy. she does so much, and she answers the phone. And sure, I have time. Oh, okay. And I told her about the project a little bit, about it. And I told her, I says, I need to give this away. I need to entrust this with someone. And she listened a while, and then she said, I have an idea. Would you like to hear about it? And I said, sure. Just flipping, sure. And she said, well, she paused, a little bit and said, Friends Peace Teams, Asia West Pacific could take this on as a project and I would head it up. And it was like, it was so real. It was so real. And there probably was maybe a minute and a half or even two minutes of total silence on the phone. I was stunned, like here it is. And I kind of, in a sense, I held my breath. And I didn't think a whole lot about it. And I said, yes, it just came out. And so that was the beginning of Power of Goodness, being under the care of Friends Peace Teams. And it was, oh gosh, what they have done with that project is absolutely awesome. Absolutely awesome. And Nadine looked at me once because I thought I had given this away. And she looked at me, she says, Janet, I want you part of this as long as you're alive. And it was kind of a challenge. It was kind of a challenge because when I would start to do things, I'd go on their meetings that we did a lot on Zoom. And I would say, well, what do you think needs to be done, Janet? And one thing that I strongly felt was we need to find new stories and expand this. And I just didn't seem to have my heart in it. And kind of pulled away. I didn't feel good about myself and saying, oh, I should be doing this. And I came to realize that I really hadn't backed away from the work because I was defining who I was with all of this work, because it was exciting. And so I kind of let go of that, and here I am now. But yes, and here's Power of Goodness becomes a project of peace teams, and here's a group of Indonesians waving at us. So expanding Power of Goodness, it started in Russia. I mean, the Power of Goodness project. I started in Russia, went to Chechnya, Indonesia, and the Ukraine, and to the rest of the world. We don't know, I hope 100 years from now, it's expanded a lot, yes. And we put this in, this is from Chechnya. And the guiding belief of the Power of Goodness project that, and Kofi Annan, who was a former Secretary General of the United Nations, that his quote there really says what Power of Goodness is about. There is no trust more sacred than the one the world holds with children. There is no duty more important than ensuring their rights are respected, that their lives are free from fear and want as they grow up in peace. And yeah. So I feel blessed for being given this work. Humbled at how it took off, and all these other people were in it, and you know, in some small way, you know, we said in the beginning to teach the youth of the world to learn the ways of peace. And if we can do that, you know, things are going to work. Are there any questions?
I will.
And Ray will run this around.
Janet, this is Ellen Atkinson, and I'm so grateful to hearing your full story. I've certainly heard parts of it before, and I think you should be pleased that you had this opportunity to share with us. My question is, what are we doing with the U.S. children and the power of goodness? And how could it possibly expand? My first question is, what is being done in the US? And secondly, my concern is that there's a lot of fear mongering about China and a lot of fear mongering about Russia. And that's affecting our national policy and how we're spending our money.
Mm.
And I think the youth in the United States should have the opportunity to focus on other ways of looking at the world. Thank you.
You know, I'm sorry to say now, I don't have all the answers because I'm not real close with everything that Friends Peace is doing with this. But as far as I know, there have not been inroads in the US. And I have presented this to some teachers. And unfortunately, I remember one answer, it was actually at a Quaker school, saying, you know, I don't know what, I don't think there's anything here that we could use at our school. Yes, you know, and but you know, as you ask that question, my heart is lifted because let's visualize, let's have a vision of this going into our country also. You know, it's and we have found that the stories we initially believed that they were for younger kids. And then one of the psychologists worked on college level and with adults, and she used the stories in her private practice. And there's one story that she had to tell. I don't know if we have time now, but I will. She was counseling with someone, a young woman who had been raped several times by Russian soldiers, and it was Venera, and she said, I could not get her to deal with this. You know, I couldn't see any inroad to get within her. And one of the stories in the book is called The Healing Power of Forgiveness. And it was about a woman in California whose daughter was brutally murdered. And Abigail is her name. And she came after about an 8-year period of time, she came to forgiving this man who had murdered her daughter. And she, at the time I met her, she was going on to death row in prisons and working with people who had committed murder. And I believe she still is doing this, and so this woman, I mean, that was the true story in Power of Goodness. And she so she read this story to this woman who had been brutally raped. And after them talking about it, and the woman just kind of sighed and says, "Oh, if she can forgive that, I can work on forgiveness too." She still had a lot more work to do over what happened to her, but it opened her up and she was able to work ahead and doing it. So I'm talking a lot. Another question. Is there anybody else on Zoom who has a question?
Janet, I think we're just kind of overwhelmed and stunned. It's amazing. And I'm so grateful that this is in the world. And yes, we want it to expand. And we're all thinking, yes, I want this book. I want this to happen in my community, in my world. Thank you. Thank you for the work.
Yeah. I feel a calling right now, and this is my first time that, I mean, as I said, when I came in, I was so tired. I just didn't know. And, the stress of putting up everything out there and making up those little posters on the pillars and everything. And I walked in here and saw all of you here, and knowing that so many people on Zoom, that and I love to talk about this. I could, if you come over and would like me to talk for a couple hours about it, I'd be happy to. I'm serious. And poor Ollie has heard it so many times, and so is Pamela and Rex, my son and daughter back there, and Steve, has heard a lot about it. But that maybe I might go around to other communities, and talk about this. And I didn't say there. We have another celebrity in the room. This little lady up front here, I think her name is, there's two Nancys, but the one I'm thinking of is Nancy McIntyre. Nancy, would you stand up, please? Turn around, take a bow. I'll tell you what she did. We wanted to get a teacher's manual for the in Chechnya for the teachers to have, as they go to a workshop, but they need to take something home to refer to, and so they drafted a manual, and then they said, well, why don't you get someone to edit this and to look it over. And I thought, oh my gosh, who would I get? Well, I didn't know I had this great friend already that lived just stone's throw away. It was Nancy McIntyre. And she had a background in education. And we teamed, and I also got Julie Bates, who was who used to be a resident here. And she had to move on in her life. She really wasn't doing well and still isn't. But she had a PhD in curriculum development. You know, perfect person. I don't know what your hats are, but in reading. Okay, perfect team. And so they worked together and brushed things up in the manual. And we had it translated. All I know is it was translated into Russian, Chechen, and English. And right now it's probably in lots of languages. But I so sorry I slighted you. I
It
slighted.
was such a joy to be a part of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wonder if you could just summarize perhaps a couple of the stories that are especially meaningful to you and.
Oh.
Just give,
Well, I was planning to do them. Now that you speak of it, you know, I don't know which one to read. Oh, you know, we do have,
you should just summarize.
well, we do have three of the stories that are out in Flower Alley and some of the artwork. And I have always loved the story of the mosque, and that is out there. And in Chechnya, they were reading that story and studying it in a class. And the hero in the story is a Russian soldier. Now, it's a historic, true story. And and here they are invaded with Russian soldiers all around them. And at the end of the class, or towards the end, a little boy says, "Oh, so not all Russian soldiers are bad." You know, it's very simple, but it's also profound, because I would love to know where he is now, because that happened very early in the project. And I do encourage you, if you would like a copy of the book, or if you would like to, Friends Peace Teams has a weekly email, and you can get it, and and of course, we're always open for donations to do this wonderful work. It's one of these little non-profits. It's volunteer. Yeah.